During war, disaster, or even a winter spent off-grid, shelter is only as good as the air inside it. Throughout history, soldiers and civilians alike have built strong bunkers, dugouts, and earthen shelters, only to discover too late that warmth without air circulation can kill faster than cold. The lesson was hard-learned, especially during World War II, where trench shelters, underground bunkers, and improvised dugouts often turned deadly, not from combat, but from suffocation, carbon monoxide buildup, and damp air that sapped body heat. There's one principle that separates a livable survival shelter from a sealed coffin airflow. And the trick that made all the difference is as simple as how you place your vents. Every World War II bunker engineer knew that airflow was survival, not luxury. In the frozen winters of the Eastern Front and the rain-soaked trenches of Western Europe, shelter was the most vital asset a soldier could have. Many learned that heat alone meant nothing if the air stayed stagnant. When fires burned in enclosed dugouts without proper ventilation, soldiers would quietly fall unconscious and never wake again. Even without fire, a tightly sealed shelter could trap moisture, fill the air with carbon dioxide, and breed mold that made the lungs ache. German engineers and Soviet field builders quickly adapted. They began installing paired vents, a low intake vent near the floor and an exhaust vent near the roof or back wall. The design took advantage of the natural laws of heat and pressure. Warm air rises, pulling in cooler, fresher air through the lower vent. This cycle created a passive airflow system requiring no fans or electricity and kept oxygen circulating even in sealed earthen chambers. The placement was everything. One vent low, one high, spaced apart to encourage steady movement. The most effective World War II trench shelters and bunkers all used one fundamental trick: cross-ventilation through thermal draw. Soldiers discovered that when a small vent was placed near the heat source, often a tiny fire pit, stove, or even heated stones, it pulled air upward and out through a chimney-like exit. This slight pressure difference caused fresh air to be drawn inward from a lower opening, usually cut near the entrance or at the opposite end of the shelter. This wasn't an accident. It was engineered through necessity. They used scavenged pipe sections, hollow reeds, or even tin cans joined together to form a rudimentary duct system. A simple angled cover on the outside of each vent kept out snow, rain, and debris, while the difference in height between the two openings created a steady airflow even in still weather. The result was remarkable. Less smoke build-up, steady oxygen flow, and a dry, breathable shelter that stayed warm longer because the air circulated rather than condensed on cold walls. Anyone building an underground shelter today, whether a bug-out bunker root cellar or storm refuge, can apply this same principle. Start by digging or installing one vent near floor level on the cooler side of the structure. Then create a second vent higher up, ideally exiting through the opposite wall or roof. Even a few feet of height difference between the vents will be enough to create the natural draft. When using fire or candles inside, this setup becomes essential, preventing deadly carbon monoxide buildup while preserving your heat. One of the biggest enemies of survival sheltering isn't cold, it's moisture. Without proper ventilation, body heat and breath produce condensation that seeps into walls, blankets, and sleeping mats. In World War II, soldiers living underground for weeks at a time discovered that this trapped humidity led to frostbite, respiratory illness, and freezing gear. It also accelerated the decay of wooden supports and made the air heavy with mildew. The airflow trick fixed this. By keeping air circulating, moisture evaporated rather than accumulating. Soldiers could even dry their socks, uniforms and blankets by hanging them near the warm vent outlet. Modern survivalists can use the same method to maintain comfort in cold or damp environments. When building a temporary shelter, placing a small vented gap or adjustable opening, such as a pipe, hollow bamboo, or even a PVC tube, will keep air cycling naturally. Cover the outer opening with a rock slab, bark, or angled tin to block rain, and you'll have a passive system that requires no maintenance. WWII field shelters proved that balance mattered more than brute force. During the siege of Leningrad, Soviet defenders built thousands of semi-underground shelters using nothing more than soil, planks, and ingenuity. Many of them burned tiny stoves inside made from cooking pots and scrap metal. Those who skipped ventilation quickly discovered their mistake. Smoke and fumes filled the small chambers, and temperatures fluctuated violently. But shelters with well-placed vents not only stayed warm, but dry and breathable, even after weeks of use. These same lessons carried into Cold War bunker designs, where engineers expanded the concept with filtered ventilation systems. Yet the principle never changed. One intake, one exhaust, placed strategically to maintain constant exchange. For preppers and off-grid builders today, that simple pairing remains the most reliable way to make a sealed structure livable. The key is not to overseal your shelter. True insulation comes from managing airflow, not cutting it off entirely. Start small. Whether you're constructing an emergency lean-to, an underground dugout, or even, a buried shipping container shelter, the first design consideration should always be air movement. Place your intake vent low on the cooler side of the structure, often that's the north or shaded side, and your exhaust vent high on the warmer side or right up on the roof. The greater the height difference, the stronger the draft you'll get. And if you're using a fire, make sure to locate the exhaust above it so the rising heat naturally pulls air through the shelter. If materials are limited, you can actually replicate this system using flexible tubing hollow branches, or even just simple hand-dug tunnels, angled upward and covered to prevent rain entry. Even just a few inches of continuous air exchange will drastically reduce humidity, smoke, and carbon buildup inside. For temporary shelters made from tarps or, say, snow walls, maintaining a small gap near the ground and another near the roof achieves the same result. The difference between comfort and catastrophe really is airflow. Every generation of soldiers, survivalists and homesteaders who've lived through extreme conditions learned this same truth. No shelter is truly safe without oxygen flow. The perfect insulation, the thickest walls, or the strongest structure mean nothing if air stagnates inside. The forgotten Second World War airflow trick isn't just a clever design detail. It's a survival law that determines whether heat becomes life-giving or, lethal. Modern shelter builders have the luxury of materials and tools, but the principle remains unchanged since the first wartime dugouts. Air moves heat, removes moisture, and most importantly, keeps you alive. Skip this one step, and your shelter, no matter how well built, will fail when it matters most. For those who study history not just to remember but to prepare, this knowledge connects past and future survival. Keep these lessons alive. Share this video so others can build better, smarter and safer. And subscribe to In the Beginning for more forgotten wartime innovations that still hold the power to keep you alive today.